Where do you find yourself? Are you nestled in a cozy reading nook, navigating a crowded commute, exploring a bustling downtown cafe, or perhaps lost in the virtual world? Do you thrive in stimulating environments or seek tranquility? Do the places you love make your partner cringe? Are you an open book on social media or wary of its influence? This chapter delves into the intricate relationship between our personalities and our surroundings, examining how physical and virtual environments shape our well-being. We'll explore concepts through the lens of dragonflies, Times Square, Fargo, and Facebook, highlighting the importance of considering personality in the context of place. As we journey from real-world locations to the digital realm, the very essence of place will undergo a radical transformation. Dragonflies, harmony, and well-being. My experience teaching personality psychology to architecture and urban design students has been both enlightening and, at times, perplexing. While my primary expertise lies in personality psychology, I've always been drawn to the field of environmental psychology. During my time at Berkeley in the mid-1960s, I had the opportunity to take one of the first graduate courses in this emerging field. Architects and urban designers were eager to understand the psychological aspects of the relationship between people and places, while we, as psychologists, were fascinated by the underlying psychological assumptions that guided their designs. I immersed myself in architectural and design literature, attending conferences that brought together environmental design and the behavioral sciences. One particularly memorable conference was held in Lawrence, Kansas, in 1975, largely due to the presence of Christopher Alexander. Alexander, trained in both mathematics and architecture at Cambridge University and later a graduate of Harvard's PhD program in architecture, had a profound impact on various fields with his book Notes on the Synthesis of Form. It became a seminal text for the burgeoning field of software design and continues to influence diverse design disciplines. However, its impact on architecture was more divisive. Alexander argued that the best building designs stem not from the architect's individual creativity but from timeless, locally rooted building practices. This notion of potentially rendering architects obsolete was not well received by many in the field. Alexander developed a pattern language, a system of recurring environmental forms that evolved to meet human needs. This concept resonated with me as a promising way to understand the connection between people and places, a way of truly putting personality in its place. Eager to hear more, I secured a front-row seat at the Kansas conference, notepad in hand, anticipating a profound message from Alexander. Alexander, tall and slender like a British Ichabod crane, began his keynote address, "What is architecture?" with an image of a dragonfly gently landing on a cherry blossom petal in a Kyoto garden. "And that," he declared, "is the essence of architecture." A long silence followed. I felt a mix of intrigue and confusion, leaning forward to hear more. However, the quantitative psychologist beside me shattered the moment, questioning the meaning behind Alexander's statement. It highlighted the differing perspectives between architects and psychologists, or at least some in each field. However, Alexander's core message, which I wish to explore in this chapter, is how environments can be designed to enhance human well-being. For Alexander, this is only possible through a harmonious relationship between individuals and their surroundings. While seemingly uncontroversial, this idea has been and remains a point of contention. This disagreement was exemplified in a debate between Alexander and Peter Eisenman, a postmodern, deconstructivist architect, at Harvard Graduate School of Design on November 17, 1982. Eisenman, influenced by Jacques Derrida, challenged modernism's emphasis on functional design, advocating for architecture that is challenging, whimsical, and unsettling. He believed architecture should reflect and resolve the anxieties of the present, mirroring contemporary concerns. Alexander vehemently opposed this approach, arguing that design should foster harmony and congruence, akin to dragonflies on cherry blossoms. Alexanderville, intimate connection and the design of cities. Design, for Alexander, should respond to the deepest needs of people who would live within the structures it creates. But if architects and designers are to create places based on psychological needs, what do they need to know? In a remarkable chapter called "The City as a Mechanism for Sustaining Human Contact," Alexander addressed this question explicitly, drawing on an extensive array of psychological, sociological, and psychiatric research. Point 3. He proposed a universal human need for intimate contact that he regarded as essential for well-being. An individual can be healthy and happy only when his life contains 3 or 4 intimate contacts. A society can be a healthy one only if each of its individual members has 3 or 4 intimate contacts at every stage of his existence. These contacts needed to take a particular form. People must reveal themselves, informally, warts and all, without fear. This meant they need to meet nearly every day, and those exchanges need to be strictly informal, without any script or role shaping the interaction. The sole goal was to bear one's deepest sense of self to the other. Alexander believed that prior to the Industrial Revolution, small towns fully satisfied this need for intimate contact. But with increased industrialization, people moved from more communal to more private dwellings that were set off from other houses. This led to what he called an autonomy withdrawal syndrome, which posed serious threats to both individual and societal well-being. He saw it as a pathological belief in self-sufficiency and autonomy, perhaps symbolized most poignantly by the image of a child playing alone in a big garden by herself. Many would see such an image as a positive one, but for Alexander it represented a system that had gone seriously awry and had become a threat to well-being, both individually and societally. One solution to these threats to well-being could be achieved by a more psychologically informed design of housing, so the need for intimate contact would not be frustrated. To this end, Alexander proposed a city design that would promote social contact, including such features as increasing young children's exposure to other children and increasing the likelihood of drop-in visiting among adults. His design was based on 12 geometric features that optimized the spontaneous coming together of people through high-density, modular structures. I won't go into the details of the proposed design. Let's call it Alexanderville, because a few years after publishing it, Alexander felt that it was too constraining and too deterministic. Instead, what deserves our attention is his overarching view of how the design of cities could enhance the quality of our lives by meeting human needs. As a personality psychologist, I read this account of human need and environmental form with considerable interest and a certain amount of skepticism. Recall the truism with which we began Chapter 1. Each person is in certain respects like all other people, like some other people, and like no other person. Alexander is proposing that all of us need the intimate interaction his cities are designed to promote. But, as we've seen repeatedly throughout this book, there are individual differences in personality, the ways we are like some other people and like no other person, that would very likely have made living in Alexanderville a delight for some, a matter of indifference to others, and, for some, hell on earth. The most relevant trait in this case is introversion. Extroversion. Frequent, intense, daily interactions with 3 or 4 other individuals might well be the ideal environment for extroverts. But for introverts? I don't think so either. Alexanderville, then, is a theoretical city designed to enhance our exposure to frequent, intense, informal exchanges, a high-density, stimulating place. Consider now another view about cities, one that provides a rather different view about how urban stimulation shapes our well-being. Let's call it Milgramopolis. Milgramopolis, the city as overload. Stanley Milgram, previously introduced in Chapter 1 regarding the phenomenon of familiar strangers, also explored how cities contribute to human well-being within a broader theoretical framework. In contrast to Alexander's perspective, Milgram viewed the city as a source of potent stimulation that, cumulatively, negatively impacts well-being. He argued that entering a city exposes individuals to a confluence of factors: a large population, limited space resulting in high density, and substantial social heterogeneity. These converging factors create a state of information input overload, which Milgram considered psychologically harmful. To mitigate this overload, individuals adopt adaptive strategies to reduce the volume and intensity of environmental stimulation. While these strategies offer individual relief, they can generate societal problems. Several key adaptive strategies include reducing time and interaction quality. Urban environments typically exhibit a faster pace of life compared to rural areas, characterized by quicker walking speeds and shorter interactions. This rapid tempo limits exposure to potentially overwhelming stimuli. For instance, research indicates that purchasing a stamp at a city post office is significantly faster than in a smaller town, although the interaction is less personal and engaging. Filtering low-priority inputs. Individuals may selectively ignore certain stimuli in cities to manage overload. However, this can have social consequences, particularly in diverse urban settings. People might filter out individuals based on age, appearance, or perceived social status, leading to a neglect of certain groups. Blocking input. Another strategy involves preemptively blocking unwanted stimuli. This can manifest in practices such as having an unlisted phone number to reduce unwanted calls. Additionally, individuals may adopt a guarded facial expression, signaling a desire not to be disturbed. The specific nuances of this unlisted face may vary across cities. These adaptive mechanisms are often unconsciously deployed due to a prevailing norm of non-involvement in urban environments. This norm shifts the burden of justification, requiring explanations for intervention rather than non-action. Milgram's own experiences, prompted by his mother-in-law's observations about subway etiquette, demonstrated the power of this norm. When students were asked to request subway seats from seated passengers, they experienced significant stress, and many refused to participate. Milgram himself found the request physically uncomfortable, illustrating the internalized norm of non-involvement. For Milgram, this reflects the core challenge of urban living. Cities generate overload, prompting adaptive coping mechanisms that ultimately establish non-involvement as the expected behavior, potentially making acts of civility subject to apology. Your utopia, my dystopia, you want us to move. There? So let's stand back and see what we have learned by looking at cities through the lens of Alexanderville and Milgramopolis. For Alexander, cities enhance feelings of personal agency and isolation and should be radically redesigned to stimulate more human connection and intimate contact. For Milgram, cities have too much human contact, and such exposure leads to overload and the adaptive strategies that mitigate its negative effects. Now it is true that Alexander is primarily concerned about environmental design at the level of houses and neighborhoods, whereas Milgram's focus is on the city center. And it is also true that Alexander is being explicitly prescriptive about how we ought to design cities for human flourishing, whereas Milgram's focus is on describing the experience of living in cities. But here's the issue. Alexander sees the city as a place where human contact ought to be amplified, so our universal human need for intimate contact is satisfied, whereas Milgram sees the city as a place where human contact needs to be reduced so overload doesn't challenge our limited abilities to process information. Both assume that their perspectives apply to all of us. Both underplay the possibility that there are important individual differences in the need for stimulation, especially social stimulation. Consider Alexander's initial depiction of human habitats as isolated, individualistic, low-stimulation domiciles. Such an environment is likely to be attractive to certain personalities, introverts and those who are high in locus of control, for example. And his proposed solution, what I call Alexanderville, with its high levels of social contact, is likely to be particularly attractive to agreeable extroverts and those who are open to experience. Conversely, Milgram's depiction of the city as a source of aversive overload, a frenzied sequence of to whom it may concern messages, is one that some people may actually seek out rather than avoid. Extroverts, again, or perhaps especially type A individuals. In short, one person's utopia may be another's dystopia, and the design of our living spaces should, ideally, reflect what we know about how personality and place interact. And, as we'll see, we need to go beyond the big five to understand this. Environmental personality, 8 orientations toward the environment. While broad personality traits like extroversion and neuroticism offer initial insights into our preferred environments, environmental psychologists provide a more detailed framework through environmental dispositions. These dispositions help us understand the diverse ways individuals relate to their physical surroundings. George McKechnie's Environmental Response Inventory, ERI, is a comprehensive tool for assessing these environmental dispositions. The ERI measures 8 distinct orientations toward everyday physical environments. If you're contemplating a move with a partner, roommate, or family, considering these environmental orientations can be insightful. Do any of the following descriptions resonate with you? 1. Pastoralism. PA individuals high in PA value pure environmental experiences, oppose land development, appreciate open spaces, and advocate for natural resource preservation. They accept natural forces as influences on human life and favor self-sufficiency in nature. 2. Urbanism. UR those scoring high in UR thrive in high-density living, appreciating the diverse and stimulating aspects of urban areas. They are drawn to cultural life and embrace human diversity. 3. Environmental adaptation. EA people high in EA view the environment primarily as a source of comfort, leisure, and the fulfillment of human needs. They support modifying the environment to achieve these goals, endorse private land use and technological solutions, and prefer stylized environmental details. 4. Stimulus seeking. SS individuals high in SS exhibit a strong interest in travel and exploring unusual locations. They enjoy intense and complex physical sensations and demonstrate a wide range of interests. 5. Environmental trust. ET those scoring high in ET are receptive, trusting, and open to the environment, possessing a sense of competence in navigating their surroundings. They are generally unconcerned about security and comfortable being alone and unprotected. 6. Antiquarianism. AN people high in AN appreciate antiques and historical sites, preferring traditional over modern designs. They possess an aesthetic sensitivity to well-crafted environments, landscapes, and cultural artifacts from past eras, and often collect objects for their emotional significance. 7. Need for privacy. NP individuals high in NP have a strong desire for physical isolation from stimuli and distractions. They value solitude and dislike frequent interaction with neighbors. 8. Mechanical orientation. MO people high in MO are interested in how things work and enjoy mechanics in various forms. They like working with their hands and are fascinated by technological processes and fundamental scientific principles. Consider Donald and Rachel, a couple deciding on a new home based on lifestyle preferences, not financial constraints. Donald scores high in urbanism and stimulus seeking on the ERI, while Rachel scores high in pastoralism and antiquarianism. Their disagreement stems not just from intellectual differences but also from deeply felt emotional connections to their environment. Donald's high urbanism score reflects a belief that the essence of human life lies in one's relationships with others. Cities bring together interesting and informed people and sustain a cultural, aesthetic, and intellectual life that is impossible without dense urban clusters. Cities force interdependence among people, and this interdependence weaves together the fabric of human existence. His high stimulus-seeking score further suggests that life is an adventure. There are things to do, mountains to conquer, cities to explore. To feel is to be alive, to be sensitive and responsive to the surrounding environment. The quest for adventure must not be inhibited by petty rules or conventions. The critical commitment in life is to the new, the unique, the untried, and the exciting. Unsurprisingly, Donald wants to live where he can satisfy his desires for social contact, cultural diversity, and exciting adventures. For Donald, the city is the only option. He dreams of a loft in the heart of the metropolis, immersing himself in urban life. Rachel, however, finds the city the least appealing choice. Her high pastoralism score leads her to believe, appreciate the wonder and beauty of nature. Let it into your life, and let it shape your life. Be careful in all you do not to damage or squander the natural environment. Understand ecology and it will sustain you, for in wildness is the preservation of the world. Her high antiquarianism score indicates a more nuanced preference. Physical objects are the keys by which to unlock, revealing memories and reminiscences. The gentle curve of a vase and the proud detail of a table give comfort and provide emotional support, strength, and identity with which to face the future. Life is sustained through an emotionally charged and aesthetic closeness to and dependence upon the objects that define one's personal environment. Rachel envisions a small village in the country, where she'd open a boutique called Silent Spring Antiques, selling fair trade coffee, consignment antiques, vintage clothing, and handmade furniture. She hopes Donald will join her, but he playfully says he'd rather poke his eyes out. Rachel is completely averse to big cities. Even if she has to go alone, she's determined to move to her rural retreat, surrounded by curved vases, proud tables, and 4 cats. A small group of dedicated customers would be enough social stimulation for her. While Donald might not find them exciting, they could be relied upon to contribute if a Del Jisoo violin appears for sale, a new shipment of Kopi Luwak coffee arrives, or one of the cats goes missing. In the final chapter, we will explore what happens when there is a discrepancy between our desired projects and the places we wish to pursue them. Donald and Rachel will have some negotiating to do. Assessing the personality of cities and regions, who's your place? While we've examined environments through objective lenses like demographics, stimulation levels, and social accessibility, Richard Florida's book Who's Your City? Introduces another dimension, the personality of places. Cities, towns, and neighborhoods can be characterized by traits like extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism, openness, and conscientiousness. Jason Renfro and Sam Gosling pioneered research mapping the geographical distribution of these Big 5 personality traits across North America and Great Britain. Their maps are based on the average scores of over 750,000 respondents who completed a Big 5 inventory online, alongside data on quality-of-life indicators such as health, mortality, and social engagement. The findings confirm some stereotypes while also revealing unexpected patterns. Consider extroversion, the tendency to be outgoing and sociable. Surprisingly, North Dakota emerged as the most extrovert state, defying common guesses like Texas, New York, or California. Researchers suggest this may be related to migration from Chicago, a hub of extroversion likely due to its high concentration of sales and other socially oriented professions. However, the North Dakota oil boom of 2008 offers another potential explanation. The influx of primarily young, male oil workers, roughnecks, riggers, and roustabouts likely contributed to the state's high extroversion scores. Extroversion often drives migration, as individuals seek promising opportunities, and the North Dakota oil fields were no exception. Interestingly, North Dakota also scored highest in agreeableness, the disposition to be pleasant and affable. While financial incentives may explain the influx of extroverts, the appeal of North Dakota to agreeable individuals may lie in its reputation for friendly small towns where cooperation is valued and conflict is minimized. Even larger cities like Fargo are perceived as welcoming. The Fargo-Moorhead Conference and Visitors Bureau embodies this with its slogan, "A warm welcome awaits you," emphasizing the community's warmth. This Minnesota Nice phenomenon, reflected in North Dakota and Minnesota's high agreeableness scores, extends to displays of modesty and selflessness. During the 2004 flu crisis, residents reportedly declined vaccinations to allow others in greater need to receive them. At the state level, agreeableness correlates with social engagement, religiosity, and civic-mindedness, but negatively with bar patronage. Northeastern cities, known for their lower agreeableness, might jokingly acknowledge this correlation. In contrast, openness to experience, characterized by curiosity and creativity, is heavily concentrated in the Northeast, particularly New York City, which attracts a diverse range of individuals pursuing creative endeavors. Unsurprisingly, North Dakota scored last in openness. This research highlights the potential benefits of aligning individuals with compatible environments. While it may seem ideal for agreeable extroverts to move to Fargo, their close-mindedness might prevent them from considering the idea. Conscientiousness, reflecting a dutiful and responsible population, is most prevalent in the southern U.S. states, while scoring lowest in the Northeast. Florida, contrary to stereotypes, ranks highest in conscientiousness, potentially due to its large population of older individuals who tend to be more conscientious. Neuroticism reveals a stress belt dividing the East and West. Neurotic places, characterized by emotional instability and anxiety, are associated with lower exercise rates, higher disease rates, and shorter life expectancy. New York City exhibits a particularly high concentration of neuroticism, while California embodies the opposite, with its reputation for laid-back residents. The emerging field of personality psychology is beginning to unravel these intricate connections between person and place. This research underscores the importance of environments that resonate with our personalities, highlighting both the potential for malaise when living in discordant settings and the joy of finding a compatible place to call home. Individuals living in cities that clash with their personality may experience a strong urge to relocate. For example, an affable, closed-minded, and non-neurotic individual might struggle in New York City and find a better fit in Fargo. Personalities in Siberia, connection. Reconsidered. I asked at the beginning of the chapter whether you were currently online, and there is a very good chance that if you weren't then, you will have been. Sometime today. We are increasingly engaged with Siberia, by which I mean the world of Twitter, iPhones, YouTube, Facebook, and countless other emerging technologies for connecting us all. As we become increasingly engaged with this world, as it becomes the environment in which we work, play, and express ourselves, now is the time to ask what effect it has on our well-being and how our Siberian experiences both shape and are shaped by our personalities. There are two conflicting views about Siberia. One sees it in utopian terms, as a means of efficiently and effectively connecting with others and exposing us to a limitless range of experiences and information. The other view is dystopian. It views living in Siberia as overloading, artificial, and dehumanizing, as well as drawing us away from genuine human encounter. In other words, from the optimistic utopian perspective, Siberia is Alexanderville. It is a generator of human connection. From the pessimistic dystopian viewpoint, Siberia is a Milgramopolis, an overloading and taxing environment that leads to stress and disengagement. Some recent empirical studies cast light on each of these perspectives of our wired worlds. Barry Wellman of the University of Toronto has carried out an extensive series of studies on the social connections the internet and mobile technology promote. The theoretical framework for this research postulates that there is a new form of social organization occurring in the light of technological advances, what they call connected individualism, 14 instead of people being linked to others through groups. Wellman's group proposed that each individual forms a social network that has only partial overlap with the connections established by those with whom they live in the non-virtual world. Given this new form of social organization, the challenging question was whether these kinds of networks provide the same kind of support and connection that more traditional forms of community provide. Some earlier studies appeared to show that engagement with Siberia would draw attention and energy away from real social interaction with others, that the internet and mobile technologies would have an isolating effect on individuals, with resulting costs in terms of stress and well-being. Contrary to those early concerns, Wellman's group have provided strong evidence that connected individualism is a positive development and that virtual connectivity enhances the quality of lives. For example, rather than drawing energy and attention away from engagement in the non-virtual world, internet connectivity facilitated greater, not less, real-world volunteering in an isolated community in Northern Ontario. Point 15. It is interesting to revisit Alexanderville in the light of research on connected individualism. Does virtual communication provide what Alexander postulated as the basic human need of intense, frequent, face-to-face contact, warts and all, with a close group of other individuals? For the aficionados of Facebook, Twitter, and other emerging social networking sites, the answer seems to be a resounding yes. Now it is obvious that there are qualitative differences between virtual and real encounters. We can't smell each other on Facebook, for example, yet. But engagement with the Siberian world seems to greatly Enhance the essential function of easily communicating what we care about to valued others. Wellman's group is sociological in orientation and not primarily concerned with examining individual differences in people's responses to Siberia. But my students in the Social Ecology Research Group, SERG, at Cambridge University, were particularly interested in exploring such individual differences, especially whether scores on personality traits and appraisals of personal projects could offer a glimpse into some of the more subtle relations between personality and the use of social media and connectivity. We focused primarily on Facebook and its various functions such as status updates, messages, chats, and wall postings. We were interested in exploring whether these ways of connecting with other people would enhance well-being, especially if such Facebook functions would enable people to make their personal projects visible to others and, therefore, enhance the likelihood that they would receive support for their pursuits. Point 16. The results of these exploratory studies confirmed that although all users derived satisfaction from Facebook, they showed a preference for those functions that involved intimate exchanges with one other person, in most respects just like email, rather than the more expansive functions visible to all, like wall postings and status updates. There were also interesting individual differences. Generally speaking, extroverts use Facebook more frequently and enjoyed it more, consistent with our earlier predictions about who would be most comfortable in an Alexanderville-type environment. The types of personal projects that the respondents made visible on Facebook were mainly those involving recreation, interpersonal, and academic projects. There were two types of personal projects that Facebook users seldom made visible to others. First, intrapersonal projects, such as those things you are trying to change about yourself, were seldom made visible, likely because they were seen as too intimate. And maintenance-type projects, like getting the car tires changed, were not made visible, probably because they are seen as unimportant. Those who occupy the Twitterverse, of course, have recalibrated what is to be regarded as important. Many of us have friends who enlighten us regularly on their daily ritual of obsessive flossing or the preternatural excitement of watching the dog next door vomit. There are also gender differences. Women were more willing to make their stressful projects visible to others on Facebook, whereas men were less so. These results are consistent with some of our earlier research, predating the rise of social media, showing that men who made their stressful projects visible to others in everyday life had lower well-being, whereas women doing the same thing had higher well-being. It seems as if making a stressful project visible for men enhances the stress, perhaps because it displays a potential weakness, whereas for women it reduces the stress because it opens them up to potential support. Point 17. If the research of Wellman's group and SERG is consistent with the optimistic, utopic view of Siberia, there is also research that is consistent with some of the concerns that the more pessimistic and dystopic perspective has expressed. Consider, for example, recent research on the rise of cyber overload. The researchers were interested in determining whether the kind of overload associated with emerging technologies led to compromised well-being. In a two-phase study, they determined that higher levels of cyber-based overload significantly predicted higher levels of stress and poorer health later in the study, even after controlling for all relevant demographic variables and baseline measures of health and stress. And, consistent with the argument we have been presenting in this chapter, they also found that personality had an important effect on this overload well-being link. Cyber overload was less likely to affect participants who scored high on sensation seeking, which is closely related to extroversion and to the Aries stimulation seeking. They also found the same effect with what they call place overload, which is basically the kind of overload we associated with Milgramopolis. Point 18. In short, both the utopian view of Siberia as a potentiator of human connectivity and as a source of unremitting overload have seen empirical support, although it is still too early to draw firm conclusions about the impact of new technologies on well-being. But our central point in this chapter, that relations between environments and well-being depend importantly on human personality, seems to be confirmed. We know that measurable aspects of personality and environmental dispositions predispose us to liking and flourishing in certain environments. Some seek out the chaotic, unexpected, noisy, messy, exuberant places that beckon in big cities. Others prefer the serene beauty of silence, tranquility, and isolation. For designers, the goal is to create places that will accommodate the full reach of humanity, with all their individual differences in preference and personality, not just people who, like the planner or architect, have a particular sensibility. This is no small challenge for those who create our living environments. Many intrepid designers will reject such a goal outright, preferring instead to create universally loved places that enable all of us to flourish. But as psychologists, we must remain skeptical. For every New Yorker who adores the unremitting excitement and chaos, there is another who aches to get away to a less taxing and more fulfilling place. The rise of Siberia and its suburbs, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and the rest, may provide one route out of the need for environments that are responsive to individual differences in personality and preferences. Because we have a remarkable capacity to make our cyber world infinitely idiosyncratic, we may find aspects of life in Siberia more fulfilling than life outside it. When the unrelenting stimulation of place-based and cyber-based overload overwhelms me, I can find a restorative niche on the web. I could pull up a video of a dragonfly alighting on a cherry tree in a garden in Kyoto and muse on the Alexandrian question of whether that too, in a compelling way, is the meaning of a new architecture. I suspect it is not, but to convince you, I need to turn to questions of what is natural and spontaneous and what is programmed and algorithmic. I need to explain how we invest ourselves in objects and pursuits. And, as I will show in the next chapter, I need to introduce you to the surprising insights we can gain by attending to the spit we are about to swallow. End of chapter 8.